Before I discuss the on-track action of the Australian Grand Prix, it would make sense to briefly talk about all the changes that have taken place since last year, because if there is one thing the teams, the organisers and the pundits have been keen to point out, it is that there has been so much change to Formula 1 this year. It is as if the FIA saw the huge success of Obama's presidential campaign. They decided that banging on about change would be a great way to stir up interest in the sport and score some sort of landslide victory in the TV ratings. Unfortunately, they copied Obama's campaign model a little bit too closely, because now we have seen the effect that all this change has had on the racing. The net result can be summed up with a thematically appropriate Australian phrase, bugger all. Indeed, it appears that things are pretty much as you were from the end of last season. Vettel is driving a car which is so much faster than the rest of the field they could probably get rid of the engine and he would still be able to pedal it into pole position without even breaking a sweat. Hamilton is leading the McLaren charge to second place, and Alonso, well, he is still stuck behind Petrov. I can even take the Obama analogy further, because when you look at the changes introduced, there were green technology, unnecessarily complicated bureaucracy, and can I equate the change of tyre supply to socialised healthcare? Well, I guess that all the detractors were painting a picture of an unreliable service that fell apart in seconds, and what we actually got was something that was not too different to what we had before. The rules were not the only thing to change for 2011. The BBC's coverage had a bit of a reshuffle following the departure of Jonathan Ledgard. Since Murray Walker has retired, it has seemed that the executives at ITV and BBC were determined to partner the dry and informed Martin Brundle with a hyperactive clown figure. Now, I've met both James Allen and Jonathan Ledgard, and both men are intelligent and both are excellent analysts. So I can only assume that this excited idiot persona was an editorial policy by the bigwigs based on the logic that Murray Walker faffed things up a lot and people liked him. Thankfully, the BBC has ditched this approach and instead has partnered Martin Brundle with David Coulthard. And while this may sound as appealing as inviting a couple of rival photocopy salesmen to a dinner party, not only were Brundle and DC interesting, they probably gave the best commentary of a race since the departure of James Hunt. This is the first Grand Prix I can remember where I didn't end up shouting at the TV. Well, at least during the race. Thanks to David Coulthard having to leave early to make his trek to the commentary box, Eddie Jordan has been promoted to the sole pundit position, meaning, if I'm returned to the metaphor that I have been using throughout this review, the bias of the BBC's post-race analysis makes Glenn Beck's views on Obama look like a shining example of impartial and objective journalism. Left to his own devices, Eddie Jordan would no doubt blame Kurz for everything bad in Formula 1, from the blandness of Herman Tilke's tracks to his own taste in shirts. Anyway, I am nearly 3 minutes in and I haven't even discussed the race. But if I am going to be honest, it was hardly a riveting one. Whenever Brundle says, it wasn't a classic, was it? It is his euphemism for saying it was boring. And remember, Martin Brundle's idea of exciting does not involve snorting lines of cocaine off of a prostitute or driving a flaming Humvee into an outlet of British home stores. The biggest shock from the weekend was that it was the McLarens who ended up being the only team with the speed capable of challenging the Red Bulls. Every F1 pundit and internet forum expert had said McLaren would struggle to compete at the sharp end of the grid, and the only team who would come close to them would be the Ferraris. Talking of Ferrari, they had their own pre-season drama when it was revealed that the new car would be called the Ferrari F-150. As Ford make a truck called the F-150, and in certain parts of America the word truck and car are interchangeable, Ford threatened legal action against Ferrari, prompting automotive journalists across the world to publish a photograph of both F-150s side by side and sarcastically remark that they couldn't tell the difference. Well, the joke is now on them, because after the speed that Massa showed in the Ferrari this weekend, I would not be surprised if we peeled away the carbon fibre bodywork and found that the vehicle shared surprisingly more than 3 digits in the 6th letter of the alphabet. You could give Alonso a pogo stick and he would still add 6/10 to the lap time, so despite having a handicap of driving a 3-ton truck, he was still on course to collect a podium in the race until he saw it was Petrov in front of him and appeared to give up. The most significant moment of the race happened when Button attempted to overtake Massa and ended up cutting the corner. Despite having a room full of people back in the McLaren Technology Centre monitoring the temperatures of Button's engine, tyres, brakes and farts, it seems there was no one watching the live TV footage where it was immediately obvious that Button had only managed to hold his overtake by taking a shortcut and would have to give it back. Of course, that is the story McLaren would like us to believe, because what really happened is immediately after Button had got past, Massa defended his position against Alonso as robustly as he did on lap 48 of last German's Grand Prix, meaning that in order for Button to give back the position to Massa, he would also have to let Alonso through. The other talking point of the race is that after some of F1's most experienced faces, like Jarno Trulli telling us the tyres were a joke during pre-season testing, and Mark Webber using up his rubber faster than Russell Brand in a nunnery, it took Formula 1's least experienced driver December to show the field that the good old one-stops of 2010 we had promised were a thing of the past were actually a very real possibility. Despite later being disqualified because a Sauber engineer didn't understand what a 100mm radius was, Sergio Perez is my driver of the day. After all, the lad scored F1 points on his debut in a midfield car, and they were taken away from him through no fault of his own. However, if there's one thing that can make up for all that heartbreak, it is being awarded Driver of the Day by a 28-year-old armchair expert from Norfolk, trying to pretend he is not ripping off Yahtzee Crosshall even though they have the same accent and the same first name.